Well, good morning, Eagles Nest, and thank you for joining us online here this morning. We're glad you decided to worship with us. You may recognize the set change. We're in Eagles Nest Kids this morning, right here on the Kids Daily Dose set, and there'll be more about that on the back end of today's service. You know, earlier this year, Pastor Bob had wisely stated that we've seen more rapid changes in a shorter period of time during this pandemic period. And that is, we're seeing an acceleration of pre-existing conditions unfold faster. In other words, as a nation, we may have been drifting slowly off course from the path God designed for us, and now we're getting closer to the edge of that cliff and we're stepping on the gas pedal. Today's sermon is going to touch on one of those key accelerated areas, and it's a critical one, and that's the use of online and the influence social media has on all of us. Before we get to that important message, let's ask God to meet us wherever we are and speak to us right where we are, so that we'll be open to hearing His voice today. Let's move together into praise and worship, followed by the message and then a brief announcement segment. Enjoy the service.
Explode and bring the dead to life. A love so bold to see a revolution somehow. Let love explode and bring the dead to life. A love so bold to see a revolution somehow. Now I'm lost in your freedom. In this world I'll overcome. My God's not dead, He's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. My God's not dead, He's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring, roaring, roaring like a lion. He's roaring, roaring, roaring like a lion. Let hope arise and make the darkness hide. My faith is dead, I need a resurrection somehow. And now I'm lost in your freedom. In this world I'll overcome. My God's not dead, He's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. My God's not dead, surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. My God's not dead, He's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. My God's not dead, He's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring, roaring, roaring like a lion. He's roaring. Let heaven roar and fire fall and shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall and shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall and shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar, fire fall and shake the ground with the sound of revival. Sing it out. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring, roaring, roaring like a lion. He is roaring, roaring, roaring like a lion. Good morning. If you're weren't awake before, hopefully you are now. God, we thank you so much. You are alive and with us here this morning. Maybe more accurately put, we're with you this morning. Amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy that bought with blood wholeheartedly my soul undeserving. And God, you're so good. And God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Behold the cross, an age to age, and hour by hour. The dead are raised, the sinners saved, the work of your power. And God, you're so good. Yes. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. I am blessed. I am cold. I am healed. I am whole. I am saved. Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name. I am blessed. I am cold. I am healed. I am whole. I am saved in Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name. And should this life bring suffering, Lord, I will remember Calvary has bought for me, both now and forever. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. We declare, Lord, God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Sing, I am blessed. I am blessed. I am cold. I am healed. I am whole. I am saved in Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name. I am blessed, I am cold, I am healed, I am whole, I am saved in Jesus' name. Highly favored, anointed, filled with your power for the glory of Jesus' name. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. God, you're so good. You're so good to me.
Good morning, Eagles Nest, and welcome to our service. Where's the best place that you've ever traveled to? Disneyland, Niagara Falls, Paris, the Grand Canyon, or maybe even Rome? Or maybe it's Grandma's house. You know the song, over the river and through the woods, to grandmother's house we go. I'd have to say that my favorite place would be Maui. That's where I took my wife Patty on her 30th wedding anniversary. I figured she deserved a destination like that, considering all that she's had to endure living with me for the past 30 years. The problem with Maui, however, is it's expensive. A gallon of milk was around $8. That's why we ate dry cereal all week. Recently, my wife and I have been around the world, and it didn't cost us a thing. Well, it just cost us the price of internet. We've been traveling virtually. Patty and I have traveled to Israel. And we even took her mother with us. We visited the Wailing Wall, the City of David, the Temple Mount, Mount Gerizim, the Sea of Galilee, Jericho, the Dead Sea, Capernaum, and even more. We've been to Turkey. We've seen the 7 cities of the 7 churches of Revelation: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And we've seen other places. What I'm saying is that, like you, during our current crisis, Patty and I have entered the virtual world. We've been surfing the web. As a church, we've been in a series called How Long? A look at God's timing. So far, we've seen that God's perspective of time is different than ours. He looks at time from the perspective of rest and not activity. We tend to look at it from the perspective of activity. Secondly, we've seen that God is involved in our world, and He steps in and changes the times and seasons in order to help us out. Today, we're going to talk about the digital world. Whether you're young or old, whether we like it or not, we've all been pushed further and further into the digital world. And make no bones about it, with all its wonders, with all its opportunities, with all its connections, our being driven to the virtual world by the COVID virus is paramount to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah being driven into Babylon. When you and I surf the web, we enter a digital Babylon. When we do, we enter a battlefield of ideas. Jeff Myers, in his book, The Secret Battle of Ideas About God, writes, "We live in a time of war. There are no soldiers in this battle. There are no landing craft, no bombers flying in formation, no artillery emplacements, yet attacks occur every minute of the day. The battle we're in is a battle of ideas. Ideas are thoughts and suggestions about what we ought to do. Our ideas largely determine our understanding of life's meaning, and they guide us in the way we live." The fact is that life in digital Babylon is here to stay for a while. I thank God for Zoom. I thank God for the access to information that we have today. I thank God for Amazon. I even thank God for Al Gore inventing the internet. I'm not anti-technology. I'm not anti-smartphone. But the internet is a dangerous world for all of us. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the statistics because we've heard them all. But I want to talk to you today and encourage you to be on guard when you enter the digital world. Even things that seem good could be a Trojan horse with a bad idea in it. So while surfing in the digital world, guard your heart. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 through 4 say, "Do not let your adorning be merely outward, the arranging of the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart." Peter is telling us that the heart is the core of who we are. It's the invisible center of our being. Dr. Ron Cottle, in his book, The Beatitudes, calls the heart the inner man, the character, our personality, our will, and our mind. Now, these are all modern terms, he says, but they reflect something of the biblical usage of the word heart. So for the Apostle Paul, the word heart meant the inner man. They were synonymous. It's talking about our inner world, our thought life, the thoughts and desires of our heart. We, however, in modern life tend to compartmentalize ourselves between spirit, soul, and body as if they're totally separate. But in Hebrew thought, in biblical thought, the heart is the total man. It's the total inner man working together. It's not compartmentalized. That's why in my new book that I'm writing, The Road to Happiness, I write that the heart is the core of our being. The heart then is where the spirit, soul, and body intersect. It is the alignment of our spirit, our soul, and our body, which influences our thoughts and our actions. These thoughts and actions, they influence what we do in life, which leads to the second truth about our hearts and why we need to guard them. Proverbs 4:23 tells us, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life." Our heart is not only the inner man, the core of our being, our heart is the control center of our lives. In other words, where our hearts go, or where our hearts point, our lives go. I have two sons. One loves sports and has always loved sports, and the other loves music and has always loved music. Growing up, the son who loved sports watched sports on TV. He played sports, read about sports, and watched movies about sports. Today, he spends a lot of time coaching middle and high school sports. My other son loved music. He loved to listen to music, play music, banging on stuff to the beat of music, which is why I had a perpetual headache while he was a young kid. Today, he's a gifted musician. Notice how their hearts influenced their actions. Their lives went where their hearts were pointed. Their actions followed their heart, not their heart, their actions. Harold Eberle writes that many Westerners consider the mind, the brain, and the intellect as the control center, and therefore they spend many years training the minds of children in school. At the same time, the heart is seen as untrainable and uncontrollable, wanting what it wants. Little to no time is invested in training children how to watch over their hearts. Yet in the modern world, more people end up in disaster by failure of the heart than failure of the mind. This is true on the physical, relational, and spiritual level, Eberle says. The weak heart will fail when trials come. The untrained heart is easily lured away. Relationships are destroyed. Priorities are confused. And lives end up in ruin because the heart is allowed to go anywhere without restraint. The heart is our core center. It's our inner man. It is the control center of our lives. And it needs to be guarded, and it needs to be directed. And that's especially true when we begin to surf the web. In 1 Kings chapter 11:9, the Bible reveals to us that our hearts can be turned. In other words, our hearts can be directed at good things, but our hearts can be turned. Our heart can be directed towards the Lord, but it can be turned through the ideas and influences that we experience in life. 1 Kings 11:9 says, "So the Lord became angry with Solomon. Solomon was the wisest man on the earth. God gave him great wisdom and great power and great prominence. But yet in his latter years," it says, "because his heart had turned from the Lord God of Israel, who had appeared to him." Do you want to know why Solomon's heart turned from the Lord? He surfed the World Wide Web of his day, and he didn't guard his heart. That's what the book of Ecclesiastes is all about. Solomon is probably having a midlife crisis, and he begins to look out at life, at what's desirable and what should be done. And so he began to surf what was in his day the digital world. And he says in Ecclesiastes 2:10, "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure." Boy, that sounds good, doesn't it? But not so fast. This is actually the definition of hedonism, is to just live for pleasure. And that's what Solomon began to do. He began to give his heart and his eyes whatever they wanted. And slowly it turned Solomon's heart from the Lord. He indulged himself, in fact, while moralizing to everyone else. Does that sound familiar? I mean, think about it. Solomon says, I did all these things, and he's telling us what not to do, and Solomon messed his life up. Does sound familiar. But the greatest tragedy is it left him depressed. When you read the book of Ecclesiastes, it's one of the most depressing books in the Bible. After searching everywhere for every pleasure he could ever experience, the man says it's all vanity, and he goes into depression and despair. We need to guard our hearts. Our hearts are the core of our being. They're the inner man. They're the control center. And where we point our hearts, our lives will go. And so we need to guard our hearts, especially when we surf the web, when we go out into the digital world. While we go out into the digital world surfing, we need to guard our minds. The book of Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 2 says, "I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove or demonstrate or test what is that good and acceptable and perfect," and by perfect he means complete, "will of God." In today's language, Paul is telling us, every time we go on the internet, every time we turn on the TV, every time we read a book, we enter a world that is seeking to conform us into its way of thinking. The internet is a world of images and ideas, and images and ideas are powerful things. Stephen Covey says in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that everything we do in life starts with an idea. And this is really true. He says, first we have a thought, we see something in our mind, then we set about to create it. Patty and I had the idea recently that we should plant some trees in our yard. Well, actually, she had the idea, and she kind of told me about it. So we went to the store and we bought some trees. And so we started planting trees around the yard. It seemed like a good idea at the time. But slowly it went from 3 trees to 4 trees to 5 trees to total 12 trees. And then as we started planting them, I'll just put it this way. After trying to plant a couple of them, it got a little aggravating. See how dangerous ideas can be? Just ask Patty. Ideas are powerful things. They are so powerful that they can shape our lives, but they can also shape the times in which we live. This is why William Shelley, in his book, Church History in Plain Language, outlines history with titles that capture the overarching idea of the age about which he writes. In other words, each age, each time period, he captures the essence of that time period by the dominant idea that was floating around. It's one of my favorite history books because it's so easy for me to track history. And if you take and read it, you'll find the same experience. It's easier to track history when you just look at the flow of ideas. For example, he entitles the time period between 6 BC and 70 AD, the age of Jesus and the apostles. Why? Because the dominant idea was the spread of the gospel, which, by the way, is not just a good idea, it's actually a God idea. He goes on to entitle the year 70 AD to 312 with the title, The Age of Catholic Christianity. Because at this time, there was only one church. And the word Catholic means universal. There was one universal church. So in this sense, we're all Catholic. We're just not all Roman Catholics. But that's the dominant idea of the time, the spread of the church throughout the Roman Empire. He goes on to entitle 312 to 590 AD, the age of the Christian Roman Empire, because Christianity dominates and overcomes and surpasses the Roman Empire. Do you want to know what he calls the years between 1914 to 1995? Basically to our time, because his book stops in 1995. He calls it the age of ideologies. An ideology is a system of ideas. In other words, he's saying, as he looked at history and each time period was dominated by a certain idea, he's saying that our time period, the time period which our grandparents and we have lived over the last 100 years, has been dominated by ideology. That is a system of ideas. In other words, ideas have ruled the modern world. Shelley goes on to write, he says, Arnold Toynbee, the eminent historian, once suggested that the 20th century marked the replacement of the great world religions by 3 post-Christian ideologies, ideas. And he mentions them as nationalism, communism, and individualism. In other words, the 20th century was a time in which we as a society began believing we have better ideas than God. I just ask, how's it working for us? The point we're making today is that we must guard our minds. We must guard our hearts, because where our hearts point, our lives will go. But we might need to guard our minds because ideas have consequences. Looking back on the 20th century tells us that some ideas of the 20th century weren't so hot. I say this because in reality it was the bloodiest century in the history of man. The ideas that replaced the great world religions led us to 2 world wars, and over 100 million were killed by their own governments. As Ravi Zacharias put it, in the 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche declared that we have killed God. So what do we do in the 20th century? We killed each other. We must guard our hearts, because where they point, our lives go. And when we begin to surf on the web, and I'm not saying don't surf the web. Like I started with this sermon, my wife and I have gone all around the world. We've enjoyed a lot of tremendous things when we've been out there on the web. But we need to remember it's dangerous, because there's things that can get our heart's attention, and where our hearts point, our lives go. We must guard our minds, because ideas have consequences. Some ideas are better than others. And so we need to guard our minds. We need to really think about what we're thinking about. Thirdly, while we're surfing in the digital world, we need to guard our soul. In Matthew 16, verse 26, Jesus says to His disciples, "What profit is it to a man or woman if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul?" By soul, Jesus means life, life in this world. Again, I quote Dr. Ron Cottle from his book, The Beatitudes, where he makes an interesting distinction between the heart and the soul. He says it might be helpful to point out that when the Bible speaks of the inner or total man in his relation to God, it uses heart. When it speaks of the same inner or total man in relation to the world or anything other than God, it uses the word nephesh or suke, which we call the soul. Folks, this is more than semantics. What he's saying is our heart is our inner man, our thought life, our what we feel and desire in relation to God, whereas our soul is our inner man in relation to the world. And when Jesus asked, what good is it for us to gain the whole world and lose your own soul? He's saying, what good is it to have everything in the world if you can't enjoy it because you've lost your ability to relate to the world because you've lost your life? What Cottle is telling us and what Jesus is telling us is that when our inner man is in relation to God and it points to God, we go in the direction that He wants our lives to go. But when our minds get infected with bad ideas and our hearts begin to turn away from God, it eventually affects how we live our lives and how we relate to other people. You've probably heard it said, I know I've heard it said, that when our relationship with God is not right, our relationship with others is not right. And so when our relationships with other people are not right, we need to look at our relationship with God. Bad ideas can destroy our soul, which then in turn can destroy our lives. In the book Survivor's Club, it talks about a guy who got depressed. He got so depressed that one day he thought it would be a good idea if he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. He's one of 4 people that survived that experience, because most people just don't survive it. But he got so depressed that he actually thought it was a good idea to jump off a bridge. Folks, this was a bad idea. And let me just say here, because suicide is on the rise and gaining traction in our society as a viable option when things go bad, let me just say that's not a good idea. We don't really want to die. We want our pain to stop. And so if you're struggling with that, please contact us here at Eagles Nest at hello@eaglesnest.ch, or give the church a call at 302-684-3149. We want to help you. Folks, things are gaining traction on the internet. Folks, we're being pushed into a digital world, and there are wonderful opportunities to travel around the world and learn things. I've been studying things for Christmas, our Christmas series, and I've been studying all kinds of things. I've learned about longitude, and I've been studying the Star of Bethlehem, and I've learned about longitude and latitude and equinoxes and solstices and the stars and the constellations. I've learned a lot by studying, but let me tell you, there have been a lot of bad ideas that I've had to filter through in order to learn about the Star of Bethlehem. The digital world is a blessing, but there's dangers involved. We need to guard our hearts. We need to guard our minds when we surf the web. That's why these surfboards are here. I don't know if you picked up on that. I'm not going to surf. I'm not going to start speaking in surfese, cowabunga dude, or anything like that. But we are talking about surfing the web. When we surf the web, there are a lot of good things out there. And we need to learn and engage. And we do Zoom and all kinds of things we can do through the digital world. But we need to guard our hearts, we need to guard our minds, and we need to guard our souls. We have, folks, entered a new age. I don't mean that as new age, ooh, but we are living in a new time where if Bruce Shelley was writing his book on church history, because he stopped in 1995, he would give a title to our age that would be this. He would call it the information age. In 2007, our world changed when Steve Jobs invented the smartphone. For the first time in history, children can access information without their parents. As a parent, as a grandparent, I want to go on record. This is a really bad idea. Not the smartphone, but it's a bad idea of letting young kids be able to get ideas without any kind of filters. And I'll go out on a limb here. And I'll say, as one who has seen the consequences, in 2007, my counseling as a pastor began to change. I began to notice people were coming in, particularly marriage counseling and parental counseling. I began to notice between 2007 and 2010 that the nature of my conversations was changing. And the thing, it dawned on me one day that what was at the center of it was the use of the smartphone. Folks, the smartphone is smarter than me, so we've got to learn how to handle it. We're going to talk about that in the next few weeks. But the future, I would say, this is the limb I'm going to go out. I'll make a prediction here. The future belongs to those who can harness this modern technology without it enslaving them. And folks, the verdict is out if anyone can. We are in a new age. It's the information age. If you look back in history, technology has always led to advancements in the world and to changes around the world. That's all through the history books. And now we're in the information age. And what is concerning to me is not the technology. The technology in and of itself is not bad or evil. But what is concerning to me as a pastor, and what I've seen over the last decade or so, is that we often enter the virtual digital world casually. You probably noticed, like I have, that during the COVID crisis, we've been encouraged by many to wash our hands. I've never washed my hands this much. I, in fact, like eating with dirt. You know, I grew up, a plumber's son. I'm used to eating with dirt, building houses, crawling under houses, working with pipes. And so I got used to work. I was a printer in my early career, and I'm used to dirty hands. In fact, at one point in my life, the tips of my fingers were always blue from the blue ink that I was constant, or black ink that the base color was blue. And so I'd get blue on the tips of my fingers. I'm used to, eating with dirty hands. But now I wash my hands. I wear gloves when I get gasoline. I wash my hands after everything over and over and over again. My hands have never been so clean. I've probably got palm olive hands. We're asked to wear a mask. We've been asked to social distance. And these things are helping. We have flattened the curve and we slowed the disease. These are good things. But if you think about it, we've had very few people warning us about the viruses of the soul that lie in wait for us on the internet. And folks, bad ideas can spread fast on the web. Again, let's listen to the words of Jeff Myers. In fact, he builds his book around the idea of viruses and how they spread. Now, I struggled when I was putting this together of whether I want to use this information in illustration, because I don't want to be insensitive to the fact that the virus is going around the world. But I decided to use this illustration because I really believe that the dangers of digital Babylon are real. They're just as real as the dangers of any other virus. And we need to take them as seriously as we do the COVID virus. We are being pushed into a digital world. We have to function in the digital world. We can't just throw the technology away and say we're not going to deal with it, not ever use it, because we can't function. And there's a lot of good things on it. But Myers goes on to say, the battles we face are more like germ warfare than military warfare. He said that's because bad ideas are like viruses. He says a virus is genetic material coded by protein. Genetic material is common and ordinarily not harmful. Proteins are necessary for the body to do its work. So they're good things. Genetic material and proteins are good. He says, but separately they're harmless, but when they're combined, they can be deadly. He says, bad ideas can multiply out of control like the spread of a virus that become a pandemic. And even though idea viruses cause mass destruction, the battle we face, particularly in the cyber world, is a secret battle because it's hard to accurately identify a bad idea until after it's struck. He says idea viruses hover around us like secret agents waiting to infiltrate. What am I saying? What are we saying this morning? We're not saying that technology itself is bad. We're not saying don't surf the internet. Patty and I plan to take a lot more trips around the world. I mean, it's cheap. We love it. I mean, we are watching things. We're going around the world to the point where when we do travel again, there's some places we're going to go, especially when we go to Israel. We're getting familiar with Israel like we've never been familiar with Israel before, so that when we take a trip, and we will take a trip in the future, we're going to have a lot of information already in our head, and it'll be a whole different experience because of what we're learning and experiencing right now in the digital world. But what we are saying is, when you enter the digital world, be on guard. Guard your heart, because where it points, your life will go. Guard your mind, because ideas have consequences. And guard your soul. For what good is it to have everything at our fingertips on the web, but to lose our soul? COVID is pushing all of us into the virtual world. Now, I could give you some theological reasons for why God's allowing this, but we'll have to come back to that some other time. But we're being pushed into this digital world because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Just beware. The virtual world is our Babylon. Next week, we're going to show you, the next couple of weeks, we're going to take some time to teach how can we guard our hearts, how can we guard our minds, and how can we guard our souls, and particularly how can we help guard those of our children as well. For now, let's join together in a song of worship as we close out our service, followed by what's going on here at the Nest with Pastor Jay. God bless you, and I'll see you next week.
Caught up in your presence, and I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessing. Jesus, you don't owe me anything. And more than anything that you can do, I just want you. I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. And I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we start. I open up my heart to you. I'm caught up in your presence, and I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessing. Jesus, you don't owe me anything, but more than anything that you can do, I just want you. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. And I'm not here for blessing. Jesus, you don't owe me anything, and more than anything that you can do, I just want you.
So I'm back here on the Kids Daily Dose set. You know, I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, learning to surf as a kid. Check out the surfboard behind me. Today, we're talking about surfing the internet, using digital waves, and how those waves are leading us potentially to a digital Babylon. For those historians out there, that's into captivity. The question Pastor Bob is asking all of us is our heart leading the actions of our life, or our actions leading us around? Strong caution from our senior pastor today to guard our hearts against the online assault. Do you need a quick test? How long can you go without getting online, opening up that app, responding on that site? We all may need an online detox. Hey, listen, if you're new to Eagles Nest today, we'd love to offer you a special welcome and invite you to connect with us. Each week, we're thrilled to meet new viewers and guests, both live and online. You can simply send us an email at hello@eaglesnest.ch and let us know how you found us. Thanks. So parents out there, I've got some good advice for you. Remember that this concept of guarding our hearts is a reminder to monitor the online assault with our young adults, teens, and kids. And speaking of kids...
Pastor Jay, Pastor Jay, Pastor Jay!
Well, hey, Edgar.
Okay, I'm here. Sorry, what did I
Great.
miss?
Thank you.
Huh?
I was just explaining Eagles Nest Kids has launched a daily show to provide an online mechanism for our kids and parents during the school week. That means it runs Monday through Friday. You can check it out on all of our social platforms and watch it on demand.
Yeah, I already knew all that.
You know that. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, what would you like to add?
It's really cool. Yeah.
It's cool.
Dude.
Okay. Well, what do you like about it?
You know what I like?
What?
Miss Sherry's on there, and she's kind of funny.
Miss Sherry is great,
Yeah,
isn't she, Edgar?
And then she teaches us these really cool motions on how to do Bible, and remember our Bible scriptures.
Bible is super important, yes.
And then there's songs on there, too.
Songs, we love that.
And then sometimes there's stories from our friends from Orange.
Right, and you know what else?
Oh, yeah. She talks to really interesting people on Thursdays.
Okay.
Like you, Pastor Jay.
Yeah, that was so much fun. I got to come on and hang
really
out.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were kind of funny and weird, but funny.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. You know what else?
There's these two guys, and they do some silly things sometimes. Like they make these really tall ice cream sundaes.
No.
And I wish I was them.
What about this one? Puppets. We love puppets.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if you like that sort of thing, whatever.
Right. Hey, listen, parents, tune in. It's really a lot of fun as we engage with your kids on the regular.
Hey, Pastor Jay.
Yeah.
Can I have my surfboard back now?
Oh, yeah, you noticed that. You sure can, buddy.
Thanks.
See you, Edgar. I'm assuming you don't need a hand?
No, I got it.
Hey, if you missed it intentionally or unintentionally, we're always looking for better avenues to connect with you and to communicate better. One of those ways is Realm. It gives you email reminders, helps you sign up for events, and connect with your Eagles Nest family. Besides Realm, we have all these other online presences. It's an irony considering today's message. The online platform is greatly needed, and it does have a good purpose. But use caution, be on guard, and consider restricting your online diet to things that are going to fill you up and not stress you out. And just as a reminder, if you prefer the mask-only reserved seating on Sundays, please use Realm. You can pick any Sunday into the future and reserve your seats. If you don't do it that way, you can still send us an email at hello@eaglesnest.ch, but you have to do it every week. If you'd like to give to Eagles Nest Ministries, it's easy to give online. You can go to our webpage, click the Give tab, choose Push Pay or Realm, and make your donation. And to all of you out there, if you're listening today, maybe you're struggling, perhaps with even identifying where your own heart is even at. It may be today's message is leading you to a place. You may realize you have a hole in your heart and only the relationship with God can fill. That's the first place to start. If that's you, we would love to talk with you more about understanding the message of the cross. Please send us an email at hello@eaglesnest.ch and one of the pastors will reach out to you. Hey, join us again next Sunday as we continue the sermon series, How Long? Have a great week, and we'll see you then.